Before we can get into talking about public speaking, we have to first talk about communication, right? Communication is public speaking is a part of communication, right? So we define public speaking as any interaction that has a sender, me, a message. What's my message today? Public speaking, right? And a receiver. So communication is defined by those three things: a sender, a message, and a receiver. So that's how they define all types of communication. And there's lots, right? So we have, let's say, public speaking, which is considered mass communication. You're speaking to a bunch of people, right? Usually 5 or more. We have interpersonal communication, which is basically relationships, less than 5 people. So that can be familial relationships between a mother and a father. That can be relationships between romantic relationships. That can be friendships. Interpersonal communications also have to do with, let's say, different dynamics of relationships. It would be like conflict management, leadership styles, things like that. So that's one facet of communication. We also have small group communication, which is like groups of 3, under 5, where there's no leader, right? Everyone's kind of talking amongst themselves, discussions, things like that, and it talks about the different dynamics of group interactions. But for the purposes of this class, we're talking about mass communication, right? Mass communication is, like I said, defined as talking to large groups of people. What can be considered mass communication, right? It could be YouTube. Are you a Twitch streamer, or are you an influencer, social media, YouTube, things like that? That's mass communication because your message is attempting to reach, or has the ability to reach, large numbers of people, right? We also have part of mass communication would be things like being a sports broadcaster, right? Or a weather person. That's mass communication. Anytime you're on TV, or even people think of it more traditionally, speaking in front of people, but the media in itself also consists of mass communication. So like I said, you can be on YouTube, you can be on a Twitch streamer, you can be on the news talking about the weather, whatever it may be. Communication is really important for us all, right? Specifically, what we're talking about in this class, public speaking, right? Would y'all consider public speaking being putting YouTube videos up or having a YouTube channel? No, maybe not. Maybe y'all wouldn't think of it in that light, but it is, right? And why would we consider that public speaking? Because for the purposes of this class, we're going to define public speaking as one, intentional, right? Prepared. Face-to-face, we're going to use that for this class, but like I said, it can be online, right? Because I also teach an online class to lots of students. So it can be online, and organized. So using those 3 words, organized, prepared, and intentional, you can use that when you're talking about, let's say, a YouTube channel, right? You're organizing content, you're preparing it, and it's intentional. You have it for a reason to go out to a certain group of people for whatever your reason may be, right? Same thing with, let's say, if you're a sports broadcaster or a news anchor. A weather anchor. Is that an anchor? A weather anchor? What are those people called? Meteorologists. That's what I'm looking for. A meteorologist. So when you're giving your audience the weather, it's organized, right? You went ahead and talked about it, or prepared whatever you were going to say for today. You have to figure out what the weather was going to be, right? So it's organized and prepared, and it's intentional. You're letting out for a reason. People need to know about the weather, right? So that's going to be considered public speaking as well, even though it's not necessarily face-to-face like this class is going to be, right? In this class, we're going to speak face-to-face. You guys are going to come up here and you're going to talk to us, right? So I say all that to say there's different types of public speaking, right? So we have communication, and there's different types of communication. And then there's public speaking, or mass communication, and there's different types of that. And so for this class, you need to know about all the types of public speaking, right? And speaking in general. But in this class, we're going to do what's called extemporaneous speaking, Okay, extemporaneous speaking is a prepared, organized, intentional speech, right? But we've already covered an impromptu speech. So last class, everyone got up and you talked about yourself, right? Would you consider that a speech? No, probably not public speaking, but it actually is. That's called impromptu speaking. It might not be a speech that you wrote out, prepared, intentional, right? But it is public speaking. There's impromptu speaking. So say you're at a meeting with your boss and your boss decides, hey, actually, can you come give us some updates about that whatever you were working on? Hey, I know we made some changes to the safety, blah, 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 blah. Can you come tell us about that? And you're like, you're froze, right? I wasn't prepared to do this. That's called impromptu speaking, right? You don't have to know how to do that for this class, right? We're working on public speaking. But that's called an impromptu speech. So we've already done that. Like I told you, we're doing extemporaneous speaking in this class. That's prepared and intentional. You prepared for it, you had an outline, things like that. But there's also memorized speech, right? So when you memorize the whole speech and then you regurgitate it, I don't recommend memorized speaking. We'll talk about that later for different reasons. But memorized speaking, it's a lot harder, right, than extemporaneous or impromptu speaking, I would say. You feel really prepared, but to memorize something, you get up here, and then if you stumble, forget your place, then you're just frozen, right? If you try to memorize a long paragraph of whatever you're supposed to say, that's why we prefer extemporaneous speaking, right? We have an outline. We know basically what we're going to say, but it's adaptive. You're flexible, right? You can kind of say things in different order if you need to. If you forget something, you can skip to the next part. When you memorize a big paragraph, 2 paragraphs, whatever it may be, you're not very flexible. You just sitting here, what was I supposed to say? What was I supposed to say, right? Versus with extemporaneous speaking, it's a little more flexible for us, right? The audience doesn't know what you're supposed to be saying, right? And then the last type of speech that we have is manuscripted speech. Does anybody have a guess from the words what manuscripted speech might be? No? No? So this is speech that is prepared, sure, but not by yourself. It's also not memorized. You might be familiar with the topic. Manuscripted speech is going to be what we see presidents and also news anchors do when they have a teleprompter, right? So in the back, it's manuscripted. It's written out completely, and you're basically reading from it. Instead of reading like this, you're reading like this, right? So the president is going to have a manuscripted speech. News anchors are going to have manuscripted speeches. People at like award shows, right? They have manuscripted speeches. And that it's hard to do a manuscripted speech. Not hard, but it takes a lot of practice not to sound rehearsed, right? And that's why I tell you guys not to write your speeches out. And we'll learn how to actually do an outline in this class to where you're not writing a manuscripted speech. It's something you're just reading from, right? You don't want to do that because it sounds, and then I was supposed to say this, and when you're reading, it sounds like you're reading, right? So it takes practice to be able to sound like you're not reading from something. Someone who actually did it really well, and not political views or anything like that, but Obama was a really great speaker. And he wasn't speaking off the top of his hat, right? He wasn't just coming up with stuff. He has speech writers, people that do this for him, right? But when he was speaking, it didn't look like he was reading, right? I have a video of him speaking, not today, but later in the course, to show you manuscripted speaking and how it looks natural or less natural. But he was a really good speaker from a, teleprompter, right? Another example of teleprompter speech might be if we can remember Steve Harvey when he did that Miss America thing and he mixed up the girls and he said the wrong speaker. Does anybody remember that? Yeah. Well, he was speaking from a teleprompter. He misread something, called the wrong. It was like Miss Universe, Miss America, and so they crowned a girl, and they were like, and they had to take the crown back from her. It was a really big deal. But that was manuscripted speaking from a teleprompter. Something happened. I don't know if somebody put the word wrong or he misread, whatever it may have been. So that's one of the downsides to teleprompter speaking. In this class, we're gonna attempt to, right, inform, persuade, or entertain. That's the purpose for all of our speeches, right? We're gonna have a demonstrative speech. We're gonna have a peer introduction speech, a demonstrative speech, informative speech, and a persuasive speech. So each speech is gonna have one of these purposes, right? Most of the time, a speech is gonna be to inform someone of something. Sometimes it's to persuade, depending on the setting. We're gonna probably stick with inform for the most part because I want to apply it as best as I can to you guys' future careers or fields, right? When would you have to approach your boss or maybe several people above you or any peers, right? You're most likely going to be informing them of something. Something's not working or something we could do better or something, whatever your job may be. So we're probably going to be informing people most of all. Is that right? Understanding the process of speaking, right? Speaking works in a very specific way, not just speaking, communication in general, right? When you're communicating, whether it's in person, whether it's online, whether it's mass communication, whether it's interpersonal communication, there's one specific, there's different elements that you're gonna have to follow, right? So we're gonna have people, right? That's the receiver. I told you guys in all communication, no matter what type of communication you're engaging in, we're gonna have a sender, that's me, a message, whatever I'm trying to tell you, and a receiver. So the people, right? That's one element of communication. Then we have our context. What context are you speaking in? The context I'm speaking in is y'all are forced listeners, right? You guys aren't choosing to be here. This isn't something you came and wanted to listen to, right? A different context might be if this was something you were actually engaged in and you came to listen to me give a lecture on something maybe has to do with your field or something like that you might be learning about, right? And the context is important because me knowing what context I'm speaking in, right, helps me prepare for the speech. So because I know that you guys weren't here willingly, right, y'all fulfilling a requirement, I gotta kind of do things to make y'all want to listen to me, right? So some teachers might use tests. Hey, y'all have to listen to me because I'm gonna have a test on this, right? So that'll do it for you, right? Some teachers make the lesson more interactive, call on people, ask them questions, whatever it may be. I used to make students, when they ask questions, I used to make everybody stand up not everyone, but the speakers stand up when it was their turn to speak. Just because you need to get used to it, it's a public speaking class, you need to get used to everybody looking at you, right? And the only way you get used to it is continuing to do it. All that did was work to encourage you guys not to ask any questions. So I had to stop doing that because then y'all didn't want to stand up in front of everybody. Anyway, the context, it's important to know where you're speaking. Are you speaking in front of your bosses, right? Does your career depend on this, right? Are you asking for a promotion? Are you trying to persuade your boss? Whatever the context may be. The message, what are you trying to say, right? Are people, and that goes back into the context, are people here to be entertained, right? Are they here to be persuaded, informed, whatever it may be? What's your message that you're trying to send out? Next, we have the channel. How am I speaking to you, right? Am I speaking to you face-to-face in person? Am I speaking to you through social media, right? And communication isn't just verbal in general communication. It's also written. It's verbal. It can be verbal or written. So social media messages, right? That can be a form of a message or mass communication. Can be. So what channel is my message taking, right? Am I sending it, or is it live? Is my broadcast live on TV, right? That's all really important to your message context. Next, we have our noise. Noise is anything that stops our message from being received by the receiver, right? So noise can be, for example, some of my noise is, if I have coffee, right, I'm going a mile a minute, and sometimes I tell you guys, am I going too fast? Stop me, right? Slow me down. Last class that happened. That's noise for me or for you all, though, right? When I'm going too fast, now I'm sweating, I had too much coffee, and I'm out of breath, right? That can mess with you guys' message if I'm talking too fast, right? Or if I'm going too fast and I'm not really paying attention to if you guys are giving me messages, like listening, or if y'all are all sleeping, I'm just a mile a minute. That could be noise. Noise could be somebody getting up and leaving the room, right? Somebody's phone going off. Noise is anything that can interrupt either me speaking, right? Mentally, it could be mentally, oh, I lost my train of thought. If somebody got up and they were on the phone and they have to step out, I lost my train of thought, right? That could be noise. Somebody going to the bathroom, somebody eating in class. Maybe it's not messing with me mentally, right? Maybe I can talk if y'all are talking in the back, but maybe it's stopping someone else from receiving the message, one of the receivers, right? So that's your noise, just anything that could be a distraction to you all. And that's why I say when you come last class when y'all came up here, not to talk, right? So we give all of our attention to our speaker because I speak all the time. There's people sleeping, right? There's people on their phone, there's people eating, going to the bathroom. It doesn't bother me. But you guys may not be used to speaking, right? So when you come up here, you might not be ready to have a bunch of noise going on and be able to ignore it and continue speaking, right? So, last is feedback. Feedback is what I'm getting from you guys right now, right? We have some people looking me in my eyes, some people looking down, some people sleeping, some people eating, some people walking out, right? So we're getting feedback from our audience. I need to know how you're receiving my message, right? Are you bored? Okay, go to the next comment. They don't like this, right? Skip past this or expound on this a little more. Somebody's looking confused, right? Ask them if they understand. That's the feedback you're getting. Is my audience nodding? Are they listening? Are they looking at me dead? Right? Like last class, remember I told y'all what y'all's feedback was? Y'all were a tough crowd. Everybody was just looking like this. Right? Y'all weren't on your phones, you weren't on your laptops, you just were staring but weren't giving me any feedback, right? So y'all were just like this. Nobody was nodding, y'all weren't even on their phones, everybody was paying attention, but it was very uncomfortable, right? Did you guys have trouble speaking in front of yourselves? No? It makes you a little bit more nervous, right? Even myself, I was like, man, I'm not getting any feedback. Do they like what I'm saying? Do they care? Do they not care? Right? So I wasn't getting much feedback. So that's feedback. We went over this already. In public speaking, basically the gist of what that says is we want to think of our speech as an enlarged conversation, right? We don't want to think of our speaking as if we're speaking at people, right? So when you take in all, I'm going to go back, but when you take in all of the elements of speech that I talked about, right? That context, feedback, the noise, right? You have to take that all in, and that's what makes that enlarged conversation, right? Because if you're not taking in all of those elements of speaking and communication, then I'm just speaking at you guys. I might as well be speaking at a brick wall, right? So that's why all of the elements of communication are important. You need to be taking that all in, or you're just speaking at your audience. And I don't want to speak at you guys, right? I want to be engaged. I want to know what's going on. I want to be an adaptive speaker, a flexible speaker, versus just speaking at you guys. Glossophobia. Glossophobia is, and we're running through this stuff today, right? I try to get the little lecture portion down before we jump into speech. This is kind of just stuff you need to know, basics of public speaking, right? Kind of a little vocabulary, I suppose. So glossophobia is basically the fear of public speaking. It's the actual fear of public speaking. Not I'm nervous to come and speak in front of you guys. My face is turning red. My voice is a little shaky. Right? You're nervous. You have a little anxiety. That's fine. Glossophobia is like I freeze and I'm crying or I run out of the room. It's like the actual fear. Like people have fear of arachnophobia, spiders, whatever it may be. It's an actual phobia, not a fear. And so most people in this room, I know for a fact, well, all of you guys, I know for a fact that y'all don't have glossophobia because y'all were able to come up here. No matter how nervous you might have felt or fearful you might have felt, nobody has glossophobia, right? It's the actual fear. It's the actual fear of public speaking. It's actually, public speaking is one of the, I'm going to say number 2. They did a study, I believe it was at Harvard or Cambridge, somewhere like that. And they asked a bunch of people, what was your biggest fear, right? And it was actually second behind death, right? So nobody said, are you more afraid of dying or public speaking? Of course, everybody's going to say dying, right? But they went up to people and said, what's your biggest fear, right? And so under death, everyone's second biggest fear was public speaking. And that's so crazy, right? Most of y'all aren't going to have to speak in front of 200,000 people. So a room of 27, like I told you guys, in this class, there's nothing to fear. If you come up here and you give your speech, right? If you're here for all of your speeches, you'll make an A or a B, right? Even if you think it was really crappy. What did I say the point of this class was, right? To get in front and not be nervous of speaking, right? Not be scared to speak, to get a little more comfortable, to build a little confidence, right? I'm not a perfect speaker, right? I'm not the president. Like, I don't have to go in front of people, hundreds of thousands of people, and my speech has to be perfect. While I'm speaking out, you guys hear me saying, stumbling, what was I supposed to say? Right? You don't have to be a perfect speaker, but you need to be a confident speaker, right? You need to be comfortable speaking. And that's what we're looking for. And so the only way to get you guys there is to do it, right? So we get up in front of the class as many times as we can. have little activities, and then extra speeches. Anxiety. There's 3 different reasons, mainly, that's going to summarize why people have anxiety about public speaking, or like fear. Like I said, not glossophobia, but why are you so nervous to speak, right? Most of the time, it comes down to 3 or 4 problems. So first of all, we have an all or nothing mentality, right? So if I mess up one thing, I failed, right? No, I'm saying this whole time. I'm stumbling. I looked at my slide. Oh, I already said that, right? Speaking's adaptive, right? You can change it up. So I said that part too early. Skip it. Go to the next thing, right? So you have an all or nothing mentality. You think that if you come up here and you didn't do it perfect, you missed your speech by 30 seconds, you missed your times by 30 seconds, whatever it may be, you're thinking all or nothing. You're thinking all or nothing. It has to be perfect or I failed, right? That's not true. There's a medium in there. Next, that tendency to anticipate that things will go badly. So, right, that's a mindset thing. If you get up here and you're constantly thinking, oh, I'm such a bad speaker, I'm going to do horrible, right? So you're putting yourself in a negative mindset, and you'll probably come up here with a negative mindset. You'll worry yourself to death up here. So that's another reason why people have really bad anxiety, because they think really negative. Oh, I hate speech. I'm such a bad speaker. I don't want to go up there. I don't want to do this. And then, well, you're probably going to put yourself in a negative mindset. And many people think that public speaking is an innate skill that you have, right? So you can either do it or you can't, right? I'm a really outgoing person, so I'm a good public speaker. Oh, I'm really introverted, I don't like people, or whatever it may be. I'm not going to be a good speaker, right? I'm really charismatic, I'm not charismatic, whatever it may be. They think that those skills are innate. Public speaking is not innate, right? Because it's a combination of multiple skills, right? You don't just have to be good with people, you also have to be able to organize your speech, right, effectively, in a way that your audience will understand, right? And so even people that are really charismatic face-to-face, right? So interpersonal communication, if I'm just talking to you, might be good at that, might be able to make you laugh and have you listening to me, but when it's suddenly a room of people all looking at you, they might not be good at that. So you should think of public speaking like, let's say, basketball, right? They say hard work beats talent any day, right? So if we have somebody that's really naturally good at basketball, but he's lazy, he doesn't show up for practice, but he's really good, right? Versus somebody that's there for practice, might not be the best player, but he's a team player and he's working on himself, right? Most coaches are probably gonna pick the player that's working really hard, right? To get better, or be a team player, whatever it may be. So that's the same thing with public speaking. Yeah, there might be people that are innately good at it already, but that doesn't mean it's a fixed skill and you can't become good at it. Like I said, it's really just practice. The more you do it, the easier it is. Because all you have to get over is all of the eyes watching you. And so once you get used to doing that, you might not like it, but once you get used to doing it, it's smooth sailing after that, right? So those are pretty much all the reasons we have. Like I said, there's lots of other reasons, and of course we're just going to be nervous public speaking when you talk to people. Like I said, the only thing that's going to get you over it is doing it, right? So that's what we do in this class. And also the fear of rejections or one's beliefs. So we have an informative speech, and I came up here and I wanted to talk about, let's say I wanted to teach you guys how to play Pokemon cards or something, right? So the fear of rejection or one's belief, like, oh, you might not like Pokemon, and then they're gonna think I'm weird, right? So you might think that, and you might be nervous to get up here because you're like, you don't like what I'm gonna say, right? We have a persuasive speech, and I come up here and I want to tell you guys, let's say, not to own. I use this example all the time. Not to buy dogs from a dog breeder, but to buy dogs from a dog shelter, right? And let's say I'm pro dog shelter, not dog breeder. And what if everybody in the class has dogs from a breeder, right? And they reject my idea. And so that can cause you to be nervous as well. What time is it?
12:57.
I'm going to go ahead and probably, I'm thinking, because you guys are a really big class. And so what time do we get out? 1:45? We have an activity today. I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys what it is. We are going to do manuscripted speaking. Usually it's mandatory and everybody has to do it, right? But this is a really big class, so everybody's not going to be able to do it. you get participation points for doing it, but it's a big class. So I'm gonna take volunteers for it today. And what it is it's manuscripted speaking. Just like I told you, using a teleprompter. So what I do is I put a teleprompter on the board, and it's going. We know what a teleprompter is, and you're gonna stand at the back of the class, which kind of defeats the purpose, right? You're supposed to stand at the front of the class and make everybody look at you, but that's the only way it works in this instance because you have to read the teleprompter. And you're gonna read the teleprompter, and it's just a little activity. It's nothing for you to do that's you're supposed to do a certain way. It's just it's a fun activity. That's all it is. And we will work on that, but I'm gonna go a little bit more into the lecture. The value of public speaking in your life. I know a lot of you guys think you don't need it, but we already talked a little bit about it in different settings, even just talking in front of your boss. You want a promotion, you want to be moved to a different department. You have to present your case for that, right? You have to present information. If you're working on something and your boss wants to know how it's going, you have to be able to organize this. He said, hey, Monday I want you to meet with me, tell me how this project's going, right? You have to be able to organize that speech. You might not think of it as a speech, right? But it is. Anytime you're preparing to speak to someone, right, give them a certain message, that's public speaking. And it might not be public speaking, right, if it's just in front of your boss, but even being able to write a speech, though, right, that's what we're going to learn to do in this class. So it's very valuable to everyone. Audience analysis and listening. So one important part of public speaking is audience analysis. It's important to know who you're talking to, right? And the easiest way to convey that to you is to talk about stereotypes, right? So it's really important to know about your audience. So we use stereotypes, which, stereotypes are bad, right? But in this instance, sometimes they help us out. So for example, I want to know who I'm talking to before I go to talk to them, if that's possible, right? So let's say I'm the keynote speaker at a conference for communication, right? But let's say I'm giving this speech in California, right? I'm from the South, right? So some of the things I might use as an example, right, are some of the things that I might not even be cognizant of that I incorporate into my speech might not sit well with my audience in California, right? Likewise, say I'm a man giving a speech at a breast cancer awareness conference, right? Your audience might be, right, we're going to make an assumption, a stereotype, an assumption, might be mostly female, right? And I say that because, you could have other doctors that might be male, whoever, but your audience might be mostly female, right? So when you're a man coming up with that speech, you might want to be able to cater to your female audience, right? Say I'm going to a nursing home and I'm going to try and sell, let's say, some type of something at a nursing home, let's say, right? My audience is an aging audience, right? It's important to know that when I'm thinking of examples or trying to entertain them or engage them to reach them, you need to know that your audience may not be familiar with different trends or different information, right? And so it's just important to assume, I know we say stereotypes are bad, no, but you should know about your audience, and right, obviously I'm not going to be able to know about all of you guys, it's the first day, right? But I make certain assumptions when I go into my classes. Most of my classes are mostly men, right? Most of my students are going to go into some field that's prevalent in the South, right? The plants, the river industry, all of those things, right? Welding, instrumentation, PTech, that's all of y'all majors, instrumentation, PTech. I can say like 70% of all of my students, right? And so it's important to know that. So when I'm coming up with examples for speeches or to connect with you guys, I'm not going to want to talk about makeup tutorials, right? That's why I said earlier, for example, I said Twitch streaming, right? That might be more relevant to you guys than talking about if I brought up the name of an influencer, right? A fitness influencer that's a female, right? It might be more relevant to you all to talk about a Twitch streamer, because some of you guys might play video games because y'all are guys, right? So not that we want to talk about stereotypes to our audience, right? But we want to have them up here so that we can just be aware of stereotypes, and so that we can kind of make some assumptions about our audience, right? And it's all in the point of that is to be able to connect with our audience better, right? You don't want to be seen as out of touch. Like I said, if somebody from California likewise comes down here, right, they're going to have a different style, right? They're going to have a different way of talking. They're gonna have different vernacular. It's gonna be different, right? And so the audience, they might want to know that people down here might have more conservative mindsets, right? Is that true for everyone? No. I'm sure there's lots of local people that live here, right? But in general, Southeast Louisiana is going to be a more conservative population. That's something that somebody coming from California to speak to you guys might need to know, right? So you wouldn't want that person coming from California to come try and talk about the importance of electric vehicles to you guys, right? We run oil and gas down here, right? That's important to our economy even, right? So the person coming, they might not want to use some example about electric vehicles and getting rid of gas, right? So that's why it's important. Like I said, just a rule of thumb, just kind of know who your audience is. And you might not always be able to, but say I'm having a meeting with my boss and my boss is